We must address corruptions. We must call it out and say yes, regardless of who you are in this country. And I would want to invite every one of us to subject ourselves into a kind of audition of the lifestyle to see what we are using, how we are living in the short time we've been in office. Could we have earned that much? Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the people going around and castigating the presidency and the government, they have amassed their wealth through corruption. We must be brave enough and bold enough to say enough is enough for lies, and this is the time that we are called upon us leaders to raise up and say we must support this country, because success of every Kenyan, irregardless of where they are, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a success for every Kenyan. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to add my voice to the presidential speech. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, I do remember during the swearing in of the current deputy president that the president alluded to the fact that he has found himself working alone in this government. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've listened to my colleagues, and I must say, we believe in a society where a husband will lock the kitchen in the morning, walk away with the keys, but in the evening come home and demand food from the wife. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm also not lost to the fact that there are people, despite of all the effort you make, even when you are in the midst of a dam or a lake, they'll tell you are blowing a lot of dust. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I want to say indeed the speech by the president and the much alluded to debate of the Adani deal in the Energy Committee, which I share. Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, we spoke about it. We had gotten information that Adani had been inducted in the US, and we asked the CS, this new information that you did not have a couple of weeks ago, now that you have it, and I can remember, and it is on record, the CS said, in the wake of the new information, we need to sit down and see the way forward. And I will not be surprised that this is what the president alluded to, having gotten new information from our development partners, having gotten new information that this company has been inducing in other countries, we have no option but to cancel the deal. Mr. Speaker, that to me is a bold decision. That to me is true leadership. True leadership, Mr. Speaker, is making the decision when you have the necessary information, but not based on the propaganda. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know we are moving in a very thin physical space in this country. And the only way to move this country forward, Mr. Speaker, is to embrace public-private partnership. And what I would request my fellow colleagues in this House, Mr. Speaker, if we think that we need to do thorough public participation before we embrace any proponent of public-private partnership, then let's enact that and then make sure that it is enshrined in the Act. Mr. Speaker, it is also not lost to me, the President spoke about us being more people-centric. I do remember he spoke about the conflict of Bill Act. That was before this House, Mr. Speaker. I also do remember, Mr. Speaker, that the President spoke about the housing. I have had the opportunity of studying in Germany and working there for 20 years, Mr. Speaker. During my tenure and working with Germany, where I used to work for IBM, I had the opportunity to move across Europe. And I can tell you, what has formed the basis of the strong social structures in Europe is ensuring that they have houses for social purposes. What do I mean by that, Mr. Speaker? Very and rare will you see families in Germany living out in the cold, because there is housing for every social class. Mr. Speaker, sir, after the unification of Germany, where East Germany was economically more downtrodden than the West, they came up with affordable housing model that ensured even the people living in East Germany were able to come up with standard. Mr. Speaker, sir, it surprises me when I listen to my colleagues here. We know that there's formal settlements, Madare, Kawangware, Mukuru kwa Ruben. We know in Nyeri we have Majengo. When will these people, Mr. Speaker, sir, up and in the line with the SDGs, live in houses that are decent, that are connected to sanitation, and which are spacious? Mr. Speaker, sir, unless somebody does not live in this country opposing affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a decision that cannot be made by somebody who does not have the social welfare of the people in the hand. Mr. Speaker, sir, Kenya is a signatory of the Millennium Goals. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals, Mr. Speaker, and one of the requirements is that everybody must have access to affordable housing, decent housing. This can only be realized if we embrace the affordable housing project, Mr. Speaker. And the last point, Mr. Speaker, that people have lamented about is the Shah and the Chief. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to invite the members to look at the social structures in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, where everybody, regardless of your social standing, regardless of how much you earn, you have access to the most sophisticated and medical services, regardless of how much you earn. Mr. Speaker, sir, my colleagues are lamenting that we are contributing 36,000 per month as members of parliament. And I would say, comparing that to the amount of money that I was contributing, and I'm happy because Senator Murango is here, he knows the amount of harambes that we attend every weekend, Mr. Speaker, just to support people who are not unable to pay their bills. What we need to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, the small teething problems that are there, we must address them. And that, Mr. Speaker, does not mean that addressing and does not mean castigating this system of Chi and Sha will justify the small problem. Mr. Speaker, let's work on it. Let's refine them. Let's address the shortfalls that are there. Let's address the teething problems that come with it and make sure that it works, because it is a right for every Kenyan to access affordable health. Mr. Speaker, Taifa Care, which is something that was attempted by the Kibaki government. It did not work. I do recall at that time, none other than Honorable Charity Gill was the Minister of Health. She did an attempt on it, it didn't work. We remember during the reign of Uhuru, it did not work. Mr. Speaker, it is the high time, and it is an opportunity to make this thing work, so that when the books of history are written, Mr. Speaker, it will be said, yes, this Senate enabled that to happen, and that will be done through ensuring that we put the legislative gaps to stop by registration and putting acts in there that will ensure that the loopholes are addressed. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not lost to us that we came to power having come from COVID, having faced one of the worst droughts in the last 40 years. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to my colleague, Senator Wambua, talk, I thought it doesn't even come from Mukambani, which was one of the most hard hit by the drought. And we know that we were not able for 3 consecutive years to service our foreign obligations. We were not able to repay the debts that were scheduled to be repaid. And therefore, cumulatively, we in this regime had to tackle all that. Mr. Speaker, it is not rocket science. When we came to power, the cost of living was high. When we came to power, inflation was high. It has come down. Let us not just oppose the president because we belong to the opposition. Let's listen and say, yes, there are shortfalls that we must address. One of the major shortfalls, Mr. Speaker, is corruption. Yes, we must address corruption. We must call it out and say yes, regardless of who you are in this country. And I would want to invite every one of us to subject ourselves into a kind of audition of the lifestyle to see what we are using, how we are living in the short time we've been in office. Could we have earned that much? Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the people going around and castigating the presidency and the government, they have amassed their wealth through corruption. We must be brave enough and bold enough to say enough is enough for lies, and this is the time that we are called upon us leaders to raise up and say we must support this country, because success of every Kenyan, regardless of where they are, Mr. Speaker, is a success for every Kenyan. As I sit down, Mr. Speaker, I know that there is the proposed High Grand Falls Dam. I know that they also proposed high dams, mega dams in Nyeri County that have been promised since we got independence. But the physical space that we move around, Mr. Speaker, they cannot be realized unless we embrace public-private partnership. Mr. Speaker, sir, my request to my colleagues, my humble prayer to my colleague, let us address the gaps that are there so that we can deliver what Kenyans have waited for 60 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is so sad that we have now an education system that will ensure an orphan gets equal opportunity, the same as a child who's been born in a rich family. But I hear, Mr. Speaker, people opposing it. Mr. Speaker, it is a high time we as leaders now join hands and say we must work for Kenyans, regardless of where you come from. Whether you come from a marginalized community, whether you come from the Murima community, every child has a right to access education, and that can only be done if those kids who go to academies or even in the university communities, they pay a little bit more than those who are orphans. Mr. Speaker, this is what the president is saying, an education system that will ensure everybody gets a light and everybody gets an opportunity, regardless of where we come from. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot also be the business of us as politicians. When you get sick, as a poor person, the next thing you start doing is making your coffin. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must give even those who've been born in poor families an opportunity to reclaim their life because they can access better medical services. This can only be done, Mr. Speaker, if we support